Good morning, Maddie. Excuse me. How you doing? You know, when I turn this thing on, it's the first time I'll speak every day. All of these recordings. I haven't spoken to anyone yet, right? I live alone, so as you do you. So you get up in the morning, you check your email, you make coffee, you have breakfast, you take a shower, you shave. And you do, the first couple hours of your day without speaking to anybody. And then you turn on the camera and you say, "Hi, Maddie." I like this chair, but like everything in my life, it's rusting away. Tell you what, you live on the beach and you just cannot have nice things. Everything is wet constantly, and you just run your fingers along surfaces, and there's a grime, there's a grit, there's a slickness, living near the beach. That's why the poor people in Thailand always live near the beach. If you had any money at all, you didn't live near the beach. They got their own back, though, when Club Med came in and started buying up all that property on the beach. Yeah, it was the poor people who profited at the beginning at first. I think that's probably changed by now. We are reading from Leaving Thailand, a memoir by Steve Ross. This essay is called The X Factor. In the hot season of 1990, I was working 2 jobs. From 9 to 5, I taught English to the staff of the Phuket Yacht Club. And from 8 to midnight, I was the only English-speaking disc jockey on the island's single FM radio station. 189.5 megahertz. Coming to you live from the top of Khao Rang Mountain on the Diamond Island of Phuket. Yeah, that's not in the story. That's just Steve riffing. Sorry, I'll try to curb that. I wasn't getting enough sleep, but I was making great money and I was having the time of my life. True. I was still living with Gail, but I didn't spend much time at home. I could eat breakfast and lunch for free at the yacht club. And it was during my employment there that I developed an addiction to creme brulee, from which I still suffer. After teaching, I would shower and change at the hotel, and then try dinner at various restaurants and bars I'd find along the way to the radio station. On one occasion, I discovered a little open-air bar in Kata Beach called the Druid Bar. I was drawn first by the sign hung over the door, asterisks and obelisks, each with a naked cherubic Asian maiden on his lap. The Druid Bar was on a quiet side street where the 3-wheeled vending carts would park at the curb and sell cheap food, noodles and soups, and fried rice, barbecued chicken, and squid. I could eat dinner for something like 15 baht, about 60 cents US at the time. In those days, the provincial roads in Kata were still gravel, but the sois were private property and they were paved. So in the dry months, it was a lot less dusty if you got off the main streets. I could sit under a ceiling fan in front of the Druid Bar, not on the sidewalk, but adjacent to it and raised a few feet, and watch the action both on the street and in the bar while I ate. The vending carts were a favorite source of dinner for unattached bar girls who were allowed to sit and eat at the tables on the sidewalk as long as they didn't fight. I enjoyed watching them come and go, learning their greetings and their farewells, watching their shifting alliances and animosities. If they sat at the tables just below mine, I could eavesdrop. A bar girl will always assume a Farang cannot understand Thai. The Druid Bar became my regular spot, and I got to know the staff pretty well. One night, a new waitress named Noi showed up. She came from the Northeast, and she had 2 kids, but that's all I can remember of her backstory. We can safely assume that it included the abusive husband, the ailing parents, and the drought-stricken rice paddies. Noi was older than most girls, just starting out. I think she was probably in her mid-20s. She'd had some education, and she was quite bright. But she was terrified of the Farang customers in the bar. She'd bring drinks to the table and literally cower when somebody handed her money. She was not particularly attractive at first glance. She had a terrific figure, but a man starts to take that for granted in Asia. She had the usual northeastern features, the broad nose and the flat cheekbones, that on first encounter struck me as coarse. I never propositioned her, and maybe because of that, she became comfortable with me, and we would talk and sit on slow nights. I packed it and get with you, okay? I had 3 hours to kill between my 2 jobs, and I got into the habit of spending those hours at the Druid Bar, snacking on sodium-heavy treats and talking with Noi. Sometimes I would stop in for a drink after I got off work at midnight, and all the other waitresses would have been bought out, so Noi would end up serving the whole room. She was a great waitress. She was quick on her feet, and she never got an order wrong. Then one evening, I walked in for dinner, and there was Noi sitting at the bar in a red Vietnamese Cheong Sam, slid up one thigh almost to her hip bone. She had her hair piled up on top of her head and woven with flowers. There was still daylight, and she was wearing too much makeup. She looked like Susie Wong's older sister. And she was shaking with fear. She was fidgeting and chewing on her lip, and when she saw me come in, she looked at me like Lois looks at Superman. I sat next to her, and she told me she wasn't making enough money waiting tables. She needed to move her career to the next level if she wanted to support her family back in Nakhon, wherever. She reached out a hand, and she put it on my leg. We looked at each other, and there was this moment. I knew she'd never had her hand on a customer's leg before. She was begging me for something with her eyes, and I knew that if I paid her bar fine and took her to bed, so her first time didn't have to be with a stranger, she'd be grateful to me for the rest of her life. But she wasn't beautiful, you see. The beaches were full of younger, prettier girls than Noi. I was only 32 years old, which seems awfully young to me now. I was only 6 months in the kingdom, which is a very short time by any standard. I was a celebrity of a sort, with a nightly radio show and a column every month in Phuket magazine. I had a decent income and no debts. I owned my motorcycle outright, had a work permit and a residence visa, which all made me upper middle class in the Phuket pre-condo expat economy of that time. I was pretty impressed with myself in those days. I knew that I could drop by and take Noi out anytime I wanted to, so I didn't take her out that night. I made the decision to take a pass. I saw her see me make the decision. She pulled back her hand and she smiled, a brave smile, and she moved the conversation along. And after my meal, I went to work, and so did she. I continued to eat evenings at the Druid Bar. And as I watched Noi lose her fear of Farang and gain skills in her new profession, it dawned on me that she was a very lovely woman. She had grace and charm and wit. She had a way of projecting interest in a man that made that man, even if he was just a customer giving a drink order, feel like he was the only man in the room. I saw her take men away from younger, prettier girls. And somehow, without ever saying it, she gave me to understand that I could not, as I had assumed I could, just drop in and take her out anytime I wanted. The night she placed her hand on my leg and I made my decision, she had made a decision as well. Eventually, Gao returned, and we lived together for a few more months, but one day I met a girl named Nu, and I fell head over heels in love. Nu was 19, with a pixie's face and a gymnast's figure. She was just starting out tending bar and had never yet gone out with a customer. The day I met Nu, I asked Gao to leave, and I told her this time I meant it. Gao refused to leave, which I sort of expected. So I left. She found me, I left again. And this time Gao didn't follow me. But she did find me at Nu's bar one evening and hit me on the back of my head with a 20-ounce beer bottle. I lived with Nu in Chalong for 5 months and 10 days. And then she broke my heart. In fact, she damaged me for life. I still think of her every day. Still do. 30 years later, I still occasionally dream about her. Now that has ceased. I have not dreamed about her, I don't know, 10 years maybe? I don't know. But yeah, she broke me forever. 5 months and 10 days. That's all it took. Meanwhile, Noi of the Red Cheong Sam met a Dutch sailor, and they bought a bar together in a corner of the quiet Soi and the dusty main road. They weren't a couple. They were business partners who slept together when he was in town. Noi's bar was called Noi's Bar, and it did very well. The sailor would go to sea, and Noi would huddle over receipts and bills in the back. She controlled her menu, and she controlled her girls, and she bought the lease on the place next door. She knocked down a wall and put in some billiard tables. She wore tasteful clothes and a little bit of gold, just enough to establish her rank. She brought her kids down to Phuket and put them in a good school. Often I'd drive by and see them in their white uniform shirts doing homework at the tables on the sidewalk in front of Noi's bar. I went in a few times, maybe once a year, and she'd give me free drinks. We spoke politely to each other, but I think she did not like being reminded of her short time as a bar girl. She would tell me about whatever new business she'd invested in. Eventually, she owned a piece of every noodle shop and tailor shop and guest house on the Soi. The Dutch sailor dropped out of her life, and as far as I knew, she had no other men. And I was always thinking about that moment when her hand was on my leg and how my life would be different if I'd made a different decision in that moment. I am conceited enough to believe that at least once or twice she was thinking the same thing. We have a lot of these moments, I guess, an X in our lives where our paths cross another's, and we have a choice. Go left and your life will be one thing. Go right and your life will be another. I chose not to pay Noy's first bar fine and instead go find some prettier girl. And with that small decision, I changed both our lives. I have absolutely no memory at all of whomever I did sleep with on that night. But I can see Noy's face in front of me right now. I can see the desperate plea in her eyes in that moment. I can picture her in that damned red cheongsam slit up the side almost to her hip bone. She had fantastic legs. The X Factor. Yeah. Yeah. I wonder where Noy is now. Happily retired somewhere, I hope. Dandying her grandchildren on her knee. So this is the introduction of Nu. Nu will feature prominently in this book as she did in my life. And Nu, well, I won't tell you where she is now. She's fine. She's doing fine. The next essay is called Risk. Oh. Well, this is a long one. I don't know if I'll get through this whole thing today. But let's find out. Ah, there it went. All day yesterday. Didn't click once. I sit down to read, and it clicks. Yeah. Surgery is the answer, apparently, but I'm not going to do that. On my first trip to the kingdom, the plane was late into Don Mueang, and I missed my connection to Phuket. I thought I could spend the night in the airport, as I had done in other airports. I had a late meal in a coffee shop, and at the table next to me were 4 Thai men, taxi drivers just finished with their shifts, drinking whiskey and playing Tammy Ho Cunty Loads over and over and over on a guitar. They engaged me in conversation and taught me how to say thank you like a girl. When I told them I planned to sleep in the airport, they laughed. "You know, sleep here, police tap you," said one. "Airport finished at midnight. Better you come sleep my house." My house? I thought this was an example of the famous Thai hospitality. I was quite moved by it. I thanked him like a girl, and everybody laughed. I thought this meant they liked me. When the lights in the terminal were turned off, my new friend took me outside to where his taxi was parked. We drove and drove and drove. The streets became increasingly narrow. There were fewer and fewer streetlights. There was a bad smell in the air. We finally stopped on a street with no lights at all, a street only about 15 feet wide. My host ushered me into his house. It was a clapboard shack built on stilts over a stagnant canal. Inside was a sparsely decorated living room with a shelf of Buddha images, a shelf of royal portraits, and a lot of movie star posters on the walls. 3 doors led off the living room. One door opened, and an old woman came out in her nightdress. I did not speak a single word of Thai at that time, but I knew exactly what was said. "Who the fuck is this?" "He's my friend. He's staying the night." "The hell he is. Get him out of here." "I'm a grown man and I can have guests if I want." "If you're a grown man, get your own place. He's not staying here." "I hate you." "Fuck it. Do what you want. You're just like your father." His mother gave me a saint smile and went back into her bedroom. My friend took me through one of the other doors and tried to find space in his cramped bedroom to put my bags. There was a platform about 5 feet wide and a thin mattress, and apparently we were going to share this. He took me back through the living room to the third door, which led out to a platform built over the canal. There was a clay oven and some pots and pans out there. He used a plastic bucket on a rope to bring water up, and he filled a shallow pan. We both bathed our faces and hands, and I was glad there wasn't enough light to see what was in the water. We returned to the bedroom. He took off his clothes and he laid down in his underwear. He was asleep almost immediately. He drunk a lot of whiskey at the airport. I had had none, and my body thought it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I laid down next to him, fully clothed. I had $3,000 in traveler's checks, $1,000 cash, my credit cards, and passport in a money belt. I didn't sleep all night. At some point, I got up to pee, and I realized there was no bathroom. I went out on the kitchen balcony and pissed in the canal. At dawn, I woke him, and I asked to be taken to the airport. He was cranky and he was hungover. We went outside and his taxi was gone. He explained that the vehicle was shared by 3 men, each taking an 8-hour shift, and he would not have the car again until that afternoon. We walked through the awakening slum, taking turns carrying my big canvas bags. We finally reached a major road with a motorcycle taxi stand. Bag, singular, my big canvas bag. I think I only had one, obviously, the first time I came. Bag, singular. A big argument ensued with the other 2 drivers. My friend wanted to engage both drivers. One to take him and one to take me and my bag. He said he wanted to go with me to make sure I made it to the airport safely. For some reason I couldn't understand, the 2 guys didn't want the job, but he convinced them, and we started off. We rode and rode and rode. We went on busy expressways with giant trucks running alongside us. We encountered morning traffic congestion, and we wove our way between mile after mile of stationary vehicles. We got to Don Mueang, but instead of entering the front of the place, we went all the way around to the back, drove through a checkpoint where we had to duck under a barricade, and zoom past a shouting security guard, and then drive down the margin of the runway under the wings of taxiing aircraft. We got to within 100 yards of the terminal, and we stopped. By now, I knew that something was very wrong, but I wasn't sure what it was. We all 4 dismounted. The 2 other drivers immediately moved around until they were behind me. My friend dropped my bag at my feet. He had not smiled since we got off the bikes. He held out his hand. $100, he said. Why so much? I asked. He grabbed my bag and threw it behind him. He stepped right up to my face. $100. His breath stunk like death. Neither of us had brushed our teeth or even had so much as a drink of water since getting out of bed. He didn't show me any weapon, but I felt movement behind me. and I knew the other two guys had come closer as well. We were out in the middle of a field, a couple of miles wide. There were probably 1,000 people who could see us through windows if they looked in our direction. People in planes, people in the terminal, people in the tower. But I was absolutely on my own with these three guys. I opened my shirt and I dug into my money belt. I handed over a crisp $100 bill, expecting that once they had seen where my stash was, they would take that too. As soon as my money was in his hand, my new friend was all smiles again. He stepped back and gently replaced my bag at my feet. His two cronies stepped into my line of sight again, and as if they had rehearsed it, they all bowed to me at once. "Thank you very much," they all shouted. "Welcome to Thailand." Then they got on their motorcycles and roared off, leaving me out in the middle of the airfield. I picked up my bag and I hoofed it to the terminal, where I asked directions of a very surprised baggage handler who walked me to a back door that led up to a departure gate. I had to go backwards through a couple of security desks to get to a desk where I could check in. Then come back to my gate through the same security desks. I finally arrived in Phuket at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon and checked into the Patong Merlin Hotel on Patong Beach. I had been awake for at least 24 hours, and I fell asleep in the clothes I'd flown in. I woke up at about 2 in the morning, my body still on New York time. I got up and I took the longest, hottest shower of my life, and then I decided I needed a shave. I was still wired from anxiety and adrenaline, and at the same time logy from jet lag. My hands were shaking, and I gave myself a pretty deep cut on my chin. Yeah, right out there. I stuck a piece of toilet paper on it and I went out for a walk on the beach. By this time, it was perhaps 3 a.m. Most of the bars were closed, but a few were open and there was soft music coming down to the beach. The stars were unbelievably bright and there was a brilliant half moon. I took off my shoes and I waded in the absolutely still, blood-warm water of the Andaman Sea. I had not sloshed more than 50 paces when a woman glided up next to me from out of nowhere. She chose a very dark stretch of beach on which to join me. She was much shorter than me, and she kept hugging me and putting her face into my chest, so I didn't get a very good look at her. She asked me where I go, sexy man, and I asked her name. She told me it was Fan, and I told her that was a pretty name. It was years before I realized she'd been teasing me, getting me to call her girlfriend. I don't remember what else was said, but in a few moments I was stretched out in a canvas deck chair and Fan was kneeling in the sand between my knees. Fan had mad skills. It might have turned out to be the best blowjob of my life if it had lasted longer than 30 seconds. But after a week of celibacy and constant fantasizing, my reaction was almost immediate and nearly fatal. My back arched until I was supported by the deck chair at only my shoulders and thighs. Fan buried her nose in my pubes, locked her arms around my hips, and held on for dear life. Her chin was still touching my balls when I was reduced to shivers. She finally slid her head off its impalement, looked up at me, made a couple of exaggerated gulping noises, and licked her lips. She opened her mouth wide in the moonlight to show me it was completely empty. in the moonlight, I saw the face of a man, an ugly man, a man well into middle age. My spasms had knocked Fan's wig askew, and from this angle I could see his breasts were old-fashioned falsies, just domes of foam rubber and a padded bra. He grinned and said something about us being a couple now, and I gave him way too much money and got the hell off the beach as fast as I could. I couldn't face my empty hotel room, so I sat by the dark and deserted swimming pool at the Holiday Inn and tried to internalize what had just happened. At dawn, my second dawn in Thailand, I decided to bury the whole incident in profound denial and check out the inn's breakfast buffet. You know, reading this, in an aside, I think these days I would probably continue to call Fan her. I would continue to use feminine pronouns. The last paragraph of this, once I realize Fan is a man in drag, I switch to male pronouns and call him him. I think today I would probably, a more enlightened age, I think I would probably continue, even knowing that biologically this is a male. This is a male who chooses to live as a woman, so I would give him the courtesy of continuing to use feminine pronouns. Anyway, just a writer's aside. I had not eaten anything for almost 36 hours. I destroyed that buffet. I went back to my room, and again, I slept in my clothes, this time for 12 solid hours. God, what I wouldn't give for 12 hours of sleep. 12 solid hours of sleep right now. Oh my God. By 8 o'clock that evening, I was rested and showered and powdered and ready to visit the famous bars of Patong Beach. I'd been in Thailand already for 2 days, but I felt like I'd just arrived. I strolled along the beach road looking at souvenirs and postcards, being careful to walk slowly and stay calm. I intended to take my time and find just the right woman this time. Apparently, just the right woman was working at the very first bar I entered. Her name was Lot, and she was gorgeous. I believe that all women are beautiful during sex. I've looked down into the faces of many women, their hair fanned out on the pillow, and I've said, "You're the most beautiful woman in the world." I was not lying. It was true every time I said it. But Lot had the type of beauty that photo editors put on the covers of magazines. Go to the convenience store this evening and look at the current issue of Maxim. That's Lot on the cover. During the next 24 hours, we did not leave my hotel room, and neither of us wore a stitch of clothing that whole time. We bounced off the bed and off the walls. We used every piece of furniture in the room for support. We enjoyed ourselves in the bathroom and on the balcony. In a manner of speaking, I destroyed that buffet. Finally, she said that a day had passed and she had to report in at the bar. I gave Lot way too much money, and she went to wherever home was to change her clothes. I took another long hot shower and we met again at her bar. I was anxious to pay her bar fine and get her back to my room. But after she poured me a drink, she said, "I cannot go with you tonight." I was so new to the scene, I thought I did something to offend her, or worse, had not given her enough pleasure in bed. I was really new to it all. "Why not?" I whined. "I sick," she said. "Lady sick." She demurely pointed at her crotch, looking around to make sure nobody else noticed the gesture. I assumed she meant she had started her period. She told me, "You find another lady tonight. You come back my bar 3 days, okay?" I did as I was instructed. And of course, by the end of 3 days, I had met Gal. So I never went back to Lot's bar. It was a magical time for an introverted, self-conscious, insecure young man. But it was also an anxious time because that cut on my chin I gave myself while shaving never healed. In fact, it grew larger. I went to a local doctor who told me I had infected the cut by riding a motorcycle on dusty roads. He recommended lots of sunlight and seawater baths. I spent a day on the beach, and by the evening, that sore was an open, weeping crevice in my face the size of a dime. An Australian pathologist in a bar took one look and said, "You got yourself a real angry herpes simplex there, mate." He sent me to a druggist across the street for some acyclovir and told me to lock myself in my bungalow with some pot and a good book for a couple of days. "Whatever you do, mate, stay the hell out of the sun and the wind and the salt water. Those are all triggers." I read The Power of One by Bryce Courtney and Red Dragon by Thomas Harris, both very good books, by the way, stretched out in front of an oscillating fan on a cool cement floor of Gail's apartment at the barracks, with a pack of chrome tips and a bong made of bamboo at my elbow. When I wasn't reading or changing the bong water, I was remembering Lot pointing at her crotch and saying, "I sick, lady sick." For the next 5 years, I had 3 or 4 herpes outbreaks each year. I learned to avoid the triggers: sunlight, anxiety, fatigue, wind, cold. I grew a beard to keep my chin shaded and warm and to cover the lesions when they erupted. When I felt the tingle of an impending outbreak, I would cancel appointments and I would call in sick to work. I would get some pot and some acyclovir and a couple of good novels and draw the shades, unplug the phone, and wait out the storm. Eventually, my virus matured and became less interested in procreation, as all organisms do. The outbreaks became less frequent and finally sputtered out completely. I haven't had an outbreak in 10 years, but a few years ago, I rented the film adaptation of Red Dragon, and halfway through, my chin started to tingle. Yeah. I eventually lived in Thailand for 7 years, even though within my first 3 days in the country, a man made me a guest in his home and then robbed me. I paid for a kind of sex I never wanted, and the simple decision to shave resulted in an incurable disease. And yet I stayed. What is it about this place? I don't know. But, yeah, it's right there. I have not had an outbreak. Herpes lives in your spinal column for your whole life. I have not had an outbreak I don't know. I don't remember the last outbreak. I don't think I had an outbreak in Las Cruces. So that's back to 2014. I don't think I had an outbreak while I was working at the VA. So that goes back to 2007. Yeah, I don't know. Probably the late 90s was the last time I had a sore, but there's still a little scar. And, there was a time when I would have to declare to women, if the relationship got serious, I have genital herpes on my face. You're supposed to declare, right? Let them know what they're in for. But that's all over now. Thank God. Oh my God. That's really embarrassing. I used to have a job where I used to interview college academics. I worked for a company that did marketing, higher education marketing. And once a month, we would go spend a week on a different college campus around the US. So in 2.5 years, I visited almost 30 college campuses and spent a week on each campus interviewing everybody from the freshman to the dean. And I had an outbreak. This would have been, 2001, 2002. That's right. And during the divorce, it came back, the stress of the divorce and winter weather, Iowa winter weather. I started having outbreaks again and grew the beard again. And that helped. That helped. But at any rate, I hadn't grown the beard. I was clean shaven. I was working. I was at a college campus. I think it was Liberty University in Kentucky. This really hard right-wing Christian batshit crazy excuse for a university. And I'm interviewing faculty and I'm having an outbreak and I've got a round Band-Aid covering the lesion. And I'm there in my suit and my tie. And there's about 8 professors and administrators at this table. And I'm asking them questions, trying to build knowledge to write marketing materials for this school. And suddenly at one point, everybody's face, they're all looking at me and they all go, absolute shock and terror. And I knew something was wrong, so I excused myself. I got up and I went to the men's room. And there was a little dribble of greenish yellow pus coming down and hanging like a pendulum off of my chin from under this round Band-Aid. Yeah, it was hard to go back to that room. I washed my face, I put on a new Band-Aid. I had to go back in that room and continue as if nothing had gone wrong. Yeah, living with herpes. The next one is a really intense story. It's not that intense, but it's 21 pages long. I think we're going to put this to bed for the moment and come back to it maybe tomorrow. It's very pleasant to read in the morning. It's very cool and wonderful in here. All right, Maddie, you have a great day. I'm going to try to do the same. Still something wrong with Bob. He's not eating. You know, I think he might have swallowed or she, speaking of pronouns, might have swallowed a marble. The substrate in the tank is marbles. And I think she's big enough now that she might have swallowed a marble. And she's not eating. And I don't know if that'll kill her, if she'll be able to regurgitate that marble or not. I don't know. But she's not feeling well. She's not eating. And it's sad. I've come to like her a lot. Anyway, Maddie, you have a great day. I'll see you later, bud.